The morning light stretches slowly across the ancient stones of the palace, like a golden hand seeking to awaken a slumbering fortress. The first shadows of the guards lengthen across the cobblestone floor, rigid, disciplined, perfectly aligned. One can almost hear the murmur of protocol, invisible yet omnipresent, gliding like a breath between the red uniforms and the polished rifles. A sovereign calm, almost too perfect, hangs in the air, heavy with history. Then, in this unchanging order, something begins to stir. It's not movement, not yet. It's a sensation, a subtle, inexplicable tension that seems to hover between the motionless figures. Something is about to happen. Something minuscule, infinitesimal, but whose impact will resonate far beyond that morning. The crowd is still unaware. They watch, marveling, fascinated by the ceremony. Tourists raise their phones. Children point to the black plumes fluttering atop the royal guards' caps. Flashes, laughter, and exclamations emerge like bursts of light around a sacred tableau. Yet, amidst this commotion, a peculiar silence settles, an almost narrative silence, as if history itself were holding its breath. And at the heart of the scene, motionless, sculpted in rectitude, stands a royal guard. His face is impassive, his jaw still, his gaze fixed somewhere in front of him, a gaze that rests on nothing visible. He is not a man, not really. At this precise moment, he is an institution, a symbol, a living piece of a centuries-old protocol. Behind the slightly raised barrier, a discreet movement catches the light. A small hand, hesitant yet determined. A childlike figure, confident, curious. A princely presence, but still far too young to fully submit to the weight of the rules. Little Princess Charlotte observes the guard with an almost innocent intensity. Not a royal intensity, not a calculated intensity. The intensity of a child seeking to understand this world of frozen giants. For a split second, she forgets the crowd, forgets the cameras, forgets even her mother who is gently holding her shoulder. Her attention tightens, focuses, concentrates on this man, motionless like a tree rooted in the middle of the courtyard. The sun beats down on her face, revealing the spark of curiosity that dances in her eyes. She lifts her chin slightly. She breathes in, and in a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, she raises her hand. Not a royal bow, not a formal sign, not a practiced gesture, a spontaneous gesture, natural, a gesture that belongs to the world of children, not to that of crowns. A small sign, simple, pure, a sign that lasts less than a second, just 1 second, but enough to crack the sacred immobility of the protocol. Around her, no one seems to really notice. A guard behind her glances away briefly. A photographer adjusts his lens. A woman in the crowd searches for the perfect angle for her video. The world continues to move, to breathe, to live. But for this single guard facing her, everything stops. The second stretches, unfolds, expands until it becomes almost palpable. Time slows down, as if the breeze itself wanted to observe this moment, to hold on to every particle of light, every heartbeat. The guard is not supposed to respond. He is not supposed to move. He must not acknowledge the existence of this gesture. He must remain disciplined in his posture, in this demanding role where the slightest visible emotion is a transgression. But the princess's sign touches him, not as an order, not as a formal request, like a spark of humanity. It is this precise moment, this tiny pulse between duty and instinct that changes everything. The guard, like a statue that cracks without breaking, feels something awakening deep within him. A memory, an instinct, a breath. He doesn't analyze it. He doesn't try to rationalize it. He doesn't even try to intentionally make it happen. It's a reflex, a deeply human reflex. His heart pounds once, hard. His fingers tremble, microscopic lifelines beneath the black leather. His breath thickens, becomes heavier, more real. He wonders if anyone will see, if anyone will understand. But in that precise moment, he understands one essential thing. The little girl before him is not a princess. She is a child who extends an invisible thread to him. A link, a silent plea, an invitation to enter, just for a moment, into a world where one can still respond to smiles. Then the guard, with almost supernatural control, inclines his head very slightly, A tiny incline, an almost invisible gesture, but a real gesture. A breach in protocol, a drop of humanity in an ocean of rules. And it is there, at that suspended, fragile, almost secret moment, that everything changes. Because sometimes, a single gesture is enough to change the trajectory of a day, a story, or a life. The palace courtyard opens like a theater from another age. A vast paved expanse, polished by the passage of centuries, unfolds before the eye with an almost palpable solemnity. The stones, bent under the weight of time, gleam in places where the morning dew has not yet melted. They reflect the pale light like a curtain rising, revealing one of the most tradition-laden places in the world. The buildings surrounding the courtyard form a noble and austere enclosure. Their perfectly aligned brick and stone facades seem to hold the secrets of generations past. Tall, symmetrical, impassive windows silently observe the scene. They are like expressionless yet watchful eyes, observing every movement, every breath, every detail. In this rigorous geometry, the uniformed guard stands at the center, like a living column. His immense, almost ethereal black fur cap absorbs the light rather than reflecting it. One might think he wears a fragment of night on his head in broad daylight. His immaculate red tunic creates a flamboyant contrast with the austere courtyard. The buttons gleam, polished to a flawless finish. Every line of his uniform speaks of the demands of a profession, the honor of a role passed down like an inheritance. His motionless silhouette gives the impression that he doesn't belong to the human dimension. He seems frozen in a different temporality, where seconds don't flow in the same way. The world may well move around him, but nothing disturbs his axis. The protocol tolerates neither hesitation, nor fatigue, nor distraction. His eyelids don't flutter. His gaze seeks nothing. He is there to be seen, never to see. And yet, within this sculpture of discipline, there is a beating heart, a circulating breath, a story pulsating beneath the surface, invisible to those who do not know how to look. Nearby, the scene contrasts sharply with an almost disconcerting gentleness. Little Princess Charlotte walks forward, surrounded by the simple elegance of a family moment. The pale blue dress she wears billows with each step, light, almost ethereal, like a bubble of color drifting through a space too rigid for childhood. Her neatly styled hair catches the light in almost golden highlights. The little girl observes, questions, explores everything around her with her eyes. Beside him, the reassuring presence of a parent, a hand resting discreetly on his shoulder, protective. A few words are whispered in his ear, perhaps to remind him to stay close, to walk slowly, not to get carried away by the excitement of the moment. But children aren't meant to follow the straight lines of adults. Their curiosity is a river, and no one can truly control its current. When Charlotte raises her head toward the guard, another scene unfolds, a child's perception. She doesn't see a symbol. She doesn't see a protocol, a tradition, or a role. She sees a man, an adult, a taciturn giant who, for some reason she doesn't understand, refuses to move or answer her. She observes him with the quiet persistence of children searching for what they don't comprehend. She tries to guess what he's thinking. She attempts to read that still face as if it held a riddle. The distance between them is only a few meters, but it resembles an invisible border. A border that no one crosses. Not even the wind, which seems to skirt the guard's silhouette out of respect for his role. Tourists continue to flock to the courtyard. Voices mingle, animated by the excitement of the visits. People speak in all languages, point out uniforms, and whisper anecdotes heard 1,000 times. Each visitor seems to carry the impression that something unique is about to happen. A rare moment, a scene they can recount when they return home. And yet, they have no idea that this moment is truly approaching, and that it will arise from a completely unexpected simplicity. The princess takes a step, then another, and the imaginary camera that accompanies us moves closer to her, gliding almost to eye level. The ground, which seemed immense, shrinks. The uniforms become immense, imposing, almost intimidating silhouettes. The conversations of the crowd fade to a muffled murmur. In this field of vision, only one presence truly stands out, the guard. Perhaps she wonders if he can hear her. If behind that stillness there is someone who truly sees her. The palace, with its codes, its cameras, its obligations, doesn't yet impose the same distance on her as it does on adults. She doesn't yet know the invisible barriers, She only knows people, faces, gestures, so she stops, just a little, at the limit allowed by protocol. She says nothing. She does nothing. She simply observes, with a disarming sincerity, the kind one only finds in the early years of life. The guard senses this presence without looking at it, but he recognizes it. He knows who it is. And even though he mustn't show anything, he perceives this different kind of attention, lighter, more direct, an attention that carries neither expectations, nor demands, nor judgment. The courtyard, though vast, suddenly seemed to close in around them, as if the ancient stones themselves were awaiting what was to come, as if the entire palace were holding its breath, ready to welcome a moment that was not royal, but entirely human. There are moments when the world closes in, when every sound, every breath, every beat becomes clearer, closer, as if the air itself were echoing. For the guard, that moment begins the precise instant when the little princess looks up at him. He shouldn't smell like that. He shouldn't smell anything at all. The protocol demands absolute neutrality, a total absence of reaction. Neutrality is not a behavior, it's a second skin, a shell worn as a sacred obligation. But at that moment, something cracked in that shell. It all begins with a look, the look of a child who knows neither rules nor imposed distances. Her clear, curious eyes pierce him like a soft light searching for an opening. It's not a royal gaze. It's not a gaze laden with status or hierarchy. It's simply a human gaze, a simple gaze, a gaze that truly sees. And he feels that look. A subtle shiver runs down his left arm, frozen in an almost too perfect stillness. He holds his breath just long enough not to show it. He tries to regain control of his body, his thoughts, but something inside him begins to stir. The princess, however, sees none of this. She sees only a man in uniform who seems unapproachable, a silent giant whom nothing can touch, a mysterious presence unlike any adult she knows. So, in this world that is too big for her, she is looking for an anchor point. She finds it in him. The little hand goes up, gently, without hesitation, a gesture so spontaneous that it seems to float between them like a fragile bubble. This is not a royal sign. This is not an official greeting. This is not an act of insolence. It's a call. A silent hello, an innocent I see you, a are you here too? Then the weather changes texture. For the guard, the air becomes thicker, almost sticky. He feels the heat trapped beneath the layers of fabric, the subtle scent of polished leather, the tension in his shoulders, compressed by hours of standing still. Every muscle screams silently. Every tendon begs him to do nothing. And yet, a surge of energy crossed his chest, brief, dazzling, like a heartbeat that could be heard. He doesn't know where it comes from. Perhaps from a buried instinct. Perhaps from a memory. Perhaps it was a part of himself that he thought he had sacrificed to protocol. He can't really remember the last time a child smiled at him. He can't really remember the last time someone looked at him without expecting something from him. Charlotte, however, does not see the inner struggle. She sees only perfect stillness, a stillness that fascinates her as much as it intrigues her. She doesn't see the slight trembling in her fingers. She doesn't see her breath tightening in her throat. She doesn't see the emotions that are desperately trying to stay contained. She sees only her own gesture, which remains suspended. The guard felt the second stretch out. It becomes longer, heavier, more dangerous. 1,000 thoughts raced through his head. What he had learned, what he had always been told, the rules, the consequences, discipline, honor, appearance, duty, years of training, demands, and rigor, all compressed into a single moment and jeopardized by a small hand raised towards him. He can almost hear the voices of his instructors echoing deep inside his skull. You will never react, not to shouts, not to laughter, not to tears. You are the rock, you are constancy. But he also hears something else, a counterpoint, a whisper he thought he'd forgotten. An older, simpler, more vibrant part of him just asking for a movement, a sign, a return. The tension becomes unbearable. The crowd around seems to disappear. The noises blend into an indistinct soundscape. The colors are fading. There are only two people left in this space, the guard and the princess. Two opposing universes. Two realities that should never touch. And yet, the sign remains there, floating between them. A fragile, almost invisible bridge, stretched by the innocence of a child. The guard felt a warmth rising in his throat, a need for humanity, a need to shatter the glass surface that separates him from the world. Then, his mind wavers. His will is to fight. Her body is threatening to give way, not in a spectacular gesture, not in a total break. No, in something much more discreet, more intimate, more dangerous precisely because it is small. He imagines his hand responding. He imagines his neck tilting. He imagines the bubble bursting in a shared smile. It's only a second where he allows himself to dream. Then the second one ends. The princess's sign falls gently, like a petal, but the impact remains suspended in his chest. Something has just been set in motion, a crack in the armor, an inner movement impossible to stop, and the guard knows it. This simple gesture, so small, so gentle, so human, has just changed everything. The guard felt his heart pound against his chest like a muffled drum. It wasn't a normal beat. It wasn't the regular rhythm he was used to. It was an unusual sound, louder, sharper, almost out of sync with the rest of his body. He knows what that means. Something inside him is changing. He wants to return to his cold neutrality, to that kind of inner darkness where nothing has any hold on him. He wants to plunge back into that perfect mechanism where discipline erases even the very idea of emotion. But he can't do it. The princess's gesture still burns brightly in her immediate memory. He has the impression of seeing it repeat itself, like a film playing on a loop behind his motionless eyelids. The small raised hand, the glimmer of innocence in the eyes, the almost disconcerting simplicity of this sign, a sign that should never have belonged to him. The guard suppresses his emotions, or tries to do so. He tries to breathe slowly, an inhalation that cannot be seen, an exhalation that cannot be heard. Total control is what is demanded of him, but her thoughts are racing. He reviews his first weeks of training, the shouts of the instructors, the endless exercises, postures held until exhaustion, pain in the legs, back, and shoulders, and that word that we repeated like a mantra, motionless. He relives the ceremonies, the crowds, cries of joy, sometimes provocations, attempts to make them laugh, to get them moving, and he, upright, impassive, solid as a pillar, he never ever responded to anything. But today is not like any other day. Today, the flaw exists. The dilemma looms before him like a wall whose bricks change shape with every breath. On one side, duty. On the other hand, humanity. And in the middle, him, lost, unable to judge what weighs most heavily. He knows the rules. He wears them as if they were second nature. He even wears them when he sleeps. They guide his steps even before he thinks about putting them down. The protocol is not a text. It is a sacred code. No unauthorized movement. No visible expression. No direct response to a member of the royal family. No deviation. But the child doesn't know these lines. She doesn't know how much a simple gesture can jeopardize everything. She doesn't know that she has touched a place in him that protocol cannot reach. He's trying to rationalize it. She is young. She won't understand if you don't answer. You must stay in character. You must uphold the honor of the regiment. A reaction would be a mistake. A mistake is a report. A report is perhaps a form of punishment. A punishment is shameful. But then, what if responding even slightly, even discreetly, wasn't a mistake? What if it was an act of compassion, humanity, and understanding? What if this gesture, invisible to some but obvious to her, represented a connection that the protocol had never considered? The conflict is intensifying within its core. No doubt about it. Not a moment's hesitation. A real, profound conflict. One that pits two worlds against each other that should never have met. His mind splits into two voices. The first is cold, methodical, implacable. Remain still. Don't move. Don't answer. Every move is a failure. The second is warmer, more human, more fragile. She saw you. She chose you. She trusted you. You cannot ignore an outstretched hand. He sees the princess approaching very slightly, as if she were waiting for something. Something that is not said, something that cannot be explained. She doesn't blink. She's not smiling yet. She waits, and this waiting is tearing him apart. The guard felt a tingling sensation run along his back. Nervous tension. an internal emergency, as if her body itself wanted to make a decision for her. The crowd around is now nothing more than a distant murmur. The camera lenses are invisible threats, pointed at him like silent witnesses. If they see something, even the smallest, even the most imperceptible, everything can be interpreted, amplified, commented on, transformed. But does it really matter? Should the fear of others' opinions prevail over a simple truth? A truth born from an innocent gesture? He assesses everything in a flash. The risks, the consequences, the repercussions, possible sanctions, newspaper articles, internal rumors, the glances in the regiment's corridors. Then he thinks about something else. With a small raised hand, to the purity of the gesture, to the sweetness of this moment that is already slipping away from her, a dilemma closes in on him like a cage, but a burning cage which prevents him from staying where he is. He must choose. He must decide. He must become either the man he swore to be the man he wants to be. The next second will determine everything. The second before the gesture is a still second, yet it weighs like a whole minute. The air seems to thicken, saturated with tension, as if the entire court were holding its breath. Invisible but vibrant, a thread stretches between the guard and the princess. A fragile thread, ready to break or to light up. Then everything changes. The world is starting to slow down. It is not reality that changes. It is the perception, the intensity, the emotional charge of the moment. The colors deepen. The sounds begin to vibrate differently, as if muffled beneath a veil. The silhouettes in the crowd become blurred, dissolving into an unreal slowness. An imaginary camera could circle them, glide between the bodies, rise up towards the guard as if the entire scene existed only for him. His shoulder moved by a millimeter, a movement so small it could be mistaken for an illusion. But for him, it's a mountain that's moving, a mountain he was never allowed to move. His arm relaxes, barely, just enough for him to feel a tingling sensation travel up his fingers, as if his body was trying to recover the memory of a movement forbidden for too long. The space around him trembles under the tension, not physically, emotionally. The crowd is oblivious, but the palace stones seem to see what he is doing. They have seen kings, queens, wars, celebrations, but rarely a guard choose to be human at the expense of protocol. His breath became shorter, more present. He no longer controls it as perfectly as before. There is a small break in the breathing, a slight disorder in the tempo. He feels it. He can almost hear it in his chest. The princess, however, senses something. She doesn't know what it is. She doesn't understand the seriousness of it. She can only sense that something is finally moving in this frozen world. She waits, without moving, without blinking. The guard inclines his head, a slow, infinitely calculated movement, as if crossing a sea of invisible resistance. Every centimeter is a decision. Every centimeter is a rupture. Every centimeter is a choice he never thought he would make one day. The silence in his head becomes an echo charged with heartbeats. An echo where all the rules he breaks, all the boundaries he crosses, resonate. He did not smile. He doesn't speak. He's not doing anything excessive. He just makes a movement, a discreet, tiny but recognizable greeting. An answer, a breach, the breach in protocol. There's nothing heroic about it. It's nothing spectacular, but it's huge. Huge for someone like him. The world, which seemed to be in slow motion, suddenly resumes its rhythm. Time flows smoothly again. Light returns to its normal speed. The colors cease to be saturated. The sounds of the crowd suddenly resurface, like a wave of sound that overwhelms the whispers of his mind. But something remains suspended, the princess's gaze. She saw it. Her eyes widened slowly. Then, in a spontaneous, almost involuntary gesture, a smile blossomed on her face. A clear, bright, sincere smile, like a rising dawn. A smile meant for her. A smile that no one else truly understands. And that smile, for the first time in years, crossed his chest like a forgotten warmth. A gentle, almost tender warmth. A warmth that resembles neither the pride of a duty fulfilled, nor the satisfaction of successful training sessions. That's something else. It's recognition. The silent recognition of two beings who found themselves in a world that was too rigid. The tension dropped suddenly, like a rope being released. Not completely. The fear of the consequences still hangs in the air, but enough for the guard to feel his muscles relax in an imperceptible but real way. On the outskirts, nobody saw anything. Or maybe so. One or two eyes in the crowd narrow, trying to figure out if they actually witnessed something. A photographer adjusts his lens, perhaps believing he has captured a micro event. A guard further away seems to turn his head slightly, without it being known whether this is a coincidence or an observation. But the little girl, for her part, has no doubts. What she saw was clear, simple, pure. She takes a step closer. Not a single step of defiance. A step of gratitude. A step that says, I understand you. The guard can no longer move. The breach has been opened, but it must remain tiny, invisible. He cannot go any further. He must not. But what he has done is already irreversible. And so it was that, in a royal court, amidst a protocol unchanged for centuries, a man and a child shared a secret. A moment outside of time, a moment that belongs to no one else. The following day has a special light. A light that is neither bright nor dark. A suspended light. The kind of light you notice when you've experienced something that slightly disrupts the order of the world. The royal court awakens with its usual sounds. The rustle of uniforms, hushed conversations, controlled footsteps in corridors polished by centuries of discipline. Everything seems normal, and yet everything feels slightly different, as if a subtle current were flowing beneath the surface. He, the guard with a stern face, advances with his measured step. Each step is measured, but heavier than yesterday. More conscious, more loaded, he crosses the palace corridors as one would cross a minefield, all too aware of the weight of a misstep. The walls seem closer, narrower, as if the building itself were tightening its grip to test his strength. The portraits of the former sovereigns, aligned with intimidating rigor, seem to gaze at him with a new severity. He didn't sleep. Not really. He simply closed his eyes intermittently, replaying each movement, each breath, each angle of the gesture he had dared to make. This tiny, secret, forbidden movement, the gesture that still echoes in his memory like an irregular heartbeat. In the early hours of the morning, as he adjusts his clothes, he thinks he hears an inner voice repeating the rules to him over and over again. Not a real voice, but one that you eventually absorb through repetition. A harsh voice. Impersonal. Inflexible. Protocol comes first. No interaction. No sign. No initiative. But to that voice, another was added. Softer. More fragile, brighter, the silent voice of the little princess. Or rather, his gaze. That look he sees again like an ember lit in the darkness. The morning passed uneventfully. Everyone thinks everything is fine. That's precisely what troubles him, the lack of reaction. Not a word, not a single lingering glance. Nota reprimand. Nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. The consequences do exist, however, that much is certain. They are invisible, but precise as needles. He senses them in the way a senior officer catches his eye and then looks away too quickly. He senses them in a murmur that stops when he approaches a post. He senses them in the way two young recruits freeze in his presence, as if his uniform had become more dangerous. But nothing has been said. And that's the whole subtlety of the palace. The most severe consequences always begin in silence. He, however, has no regrets. He repeats it to himself without arrogance, simply as one repeats an inevitable fact. He has no regrets. His thoughts keep returning to the princess. The way she took a step forward after his gesture, a tiny step but filled with an almost naive courage. A step that only children know how to take. A step that goes through fear by ignoring it. He also thinks back to the smile that cracked her own inner rigidity, a sincere, essential smile which had nothing political or calculated about it. A smile that reminded him of something he no longer even knew how to name. He continues his patrol, adjusting his pace, controlling every movement. His body has regained its marble-like reflexes, but his mind is no longer exactly the same. One nuance has changed. A subtle, discreet, but irreversible nuance. In the distance, in a corridor, a figure appears. Small, delicate, accompanied by a housekeeper who speaks softly. The princess. She moves forward with the serious nonchalance of children of royal blood, aware of the place but not yet a prisoner of its rules. When she turns her head and sees the guard, she doesn't smile this time. She makes no sign. She makes no attempt at interaction. She simply watches him. Simply, for a long time, like looking at someone whose secret you now know, a secret shared within the cold, rigid machinery of protocol. That look is not a thank you. This is not an invitation. It's not even a memory. It's a continuation. A silent acknowledgement that says, I haven't forgotten anything. The housekeeper speaks to her, but she only half listens. She keeps her eyes fixed on him until distance separates them again. The guard remains perfectly still, as required by his role. But beneath his uniform, something breathes differently. A very slight, almost imperceptible warmth which wasn't there the day before. Throughout the day, the sounds from the palace continue to circulate. The steps, the orders, the metallic clicking sounds, everything returns to normal, but one detail granulates this routine. The subtle perception that things are no longer completely fixed. Some guards, passing near him, imperceptibly slow their pace. Some people no longer dare to look at it. Others observe him discreetly, as if trying to guess whether the rumor, if there is one, is true. The palace, however, does not speak aloud. He lets the consequences settle in like tiny shadows, not immediate punishments, not direct sanctions, just a gentle tension. A diffuse pressure, a weight. It was as if everyone was waiting for the next crack in the ice. The guard knows what comes next will be determined by what he does or does not do in the following days. He knows it, but he doesn't tremble. He does not flee from this conscience. He accepts it because deep down, the moment he offered the child was not a moment of weakness. It was a moment of humanity. And sometimes, humanity is the only form of courage possible in a life built on discipline. Evening falls slowly on the palace facades. A purple tint settles on the old walls, on the uniforms, on the still cobblestones. The consequences are not over. They've only just begun. They will advance with the same slowness as twilight, without noise, without flashes, but with the precision of a shadow that stretches. And in this heavy silence, he walks, step by step, aware that the world has not yet judged him. Aware that he will not escape. Also aware that a child of royal blood has understood something that adults are still unaware of. There are gestures that go unnoticed. Gestures so light that they slip between minutes, that they get lost in the noise of the world. Gestures that we believe to be harmless, fragile, almost useless. And then there are these ones. Those who were born in secret, in a tiny breach, at the heart of a system too rigid to accommodate them. Gestures that last only a second, but that imperceptibly alter the trajectory of a life. The guard's actions that day could have been nothing. A shiver, a breath, one hesitation among many others. Yet he did shape something. Something invisible, yet profoundly real. The power of an action does not lie in its magnitude. It resides in what it releases in the one who does it, and to the one who receives it. From the royal court, from this discreet scene under the indifferent gaze of the centuries, the echo of the gesture continues to travel. It passes through walls, passes through hours, even passes through silences. It becomes an idea, a thought, a meaningful memory. It slips into the heart of the child where kingdoms have no hold. She doesn't talk about it. She doesn't ask any questions. She is not trying to reproduce the sign, but somewhere within her, a notion is growing. That even the most structured worlds possess luminous flaws. That even the highest symbols of discipline can conceal a breath of humanity. That even men frozen in their roles can remember that they are alive. This breach becomes a secret hideout, a gentle scar. As the princess grew up, she would keep this memory like one keeps a childhood secret, deeply, tenderly, away from prying eyes. He will not turn her into a revolutionary. He will not make her a dissident or a rebel, but he will make her someone who sees, someone who can recognize human beings behind the uniforms, someone who knows that loyalty should never overshadow compassion, someone who understands that power is worthless if it cannot bow before innocence. As for the guard, this gesture continues to haunt him, not as a fault, but as a point of equilibrium, a small spark of truth embedded in the metal of his duty. The days go by. The weeks that followed, the protocol continues to run like a cold, mechanical machine. Nothing has been officially changed, no text has been rewritten, no rule has been softened, but he, in his motionless walk, now carries something greater than the regulations. A memory that breathes, a silent certainty that he was, for a moment, not a symbol, but a human being worthy of a child's trust. This is not a show of pride, nor a story he will tell one day. It's a breath, a heat, a tenuous thread that connects his heart to that of the little girl he briefly recognized. Because the gestures that matter are not those that are visible. They are the ones who transform. Those who secretly, slightly shift the inner boundary between obedience and conscience, between authority and attention, between duty and kindness. In the grand theater of the world, the most powerful interactions are often those that no one notices. A glance was exchanged, a trembling hand, a head that bows, a smile that responds. It is in these millimeters of humanity that true stories are born, not the ones that make the newspapers, not those that cause scandal or become politicized, just those that remind us that we can all, one day, do something that transcends our own limits. The guard's gesture did not change the kingdom. He did not break a tradition. He did not stop time. But he reminded two beings, one an adult, the other a child, that even in the most codified place in the world, there are spaces where tenderness can breathe, spaces where humanity can express itself, spaces where a tiny movement becomes a bridge between two hearts that should never have met. And perhaps that is the true power of a gesture. The power to touch without upsetting, to awaken without provoking, to transmit without uttering a single word. Because in the end, it's not great actions that define human beings. These are those tiny moments when we choose to be better than what the rule requires, where we decide to extend a hand, even symbolically, in a world that often asks us to hold it back. 1 second, a greeting, a shared secret, one gesture that changed everything. And what would you have done in the guard's place? Let me know in the comments. I'm eager to read your perspective. If this story touched you, like it, subscribe to Guard Chrono, activate the bell, and share it with others. Because it is your actions, small, simple, human, that give life to every story we create together.